what is it about Chrono Trigger? A couple weeks ago, I popped in the game, made it to 2300 AD, and thought to myself, why does this work? On the face, it's like everything else out in that era, every other JRPG. It's got very basic combat mechanics. It's got a linear story, very little exploration. It's basically a straight line until the very end. Nearly zero character customization, right? In a role-playing game, you basically take on the role of the characters you're given. And no, this is not a Donkey Kong Country situation, okay? Please don't turn this off. I love Chrono Trigger. I really do. But why do I? Yes, it is gorgeous to look at. I mean, from the sprites to the backgrounds to the animations, it's a beautiful game to look at. And yes, the soundtrack is beyond reproach. It's one of the best SNES soundtracks in history. It might be one of the best video game soundtracks, full stop. I mean, when it was released on CD, it came in 3 discs. It's a massive, massive undertaking, and it's stunning. And yeah, the characters are charming and engaging, but that's kind of what you had in the in the 90s then. It was charming and engaging. That is the style of the JRPG. We've seen these before. Final Fantasy VI has memorable characters. Secret of Mana has very unique combat. Breath of Fire delves into deep themes. So what about Chrono Trigger makes it beloved to the point where people will state that it's one of the greatest RPGs ever made? Why is this the case? On this episode, we attempt to get to the heart of why Chrono Trigger is a beloved classic, as well as tinker with the nuts and bolts to see what this 16-bit classic has under the hood and why it hums so beautifully. Let's hop into the epoch because we are going back in time with Chrono Trigger. What was, of all the, I know the answer to this question, but for the benefit of people who don't know you, what was the SNES RPG that you latched onto the most?
Chrono Trigger.
I know, you can't even say it with a straight face.
No, I mean, the game I still love to this day. It's never changed.
So why is Chrono Trigger the greatest SNES RPG ever made?
For me, it's a combination of the era of when it came to. Like, I actually have kind of a funny, kind of a sad story with Chrono Trigger.
Okay.
I want to say I was in 3rd or 4th grade. I don't remember exactly, but I used to get bullied a lot when I was a kid because, one, I had a scar on my lip. I had a cleft palate, so I talked a little differently. I had a hard time speaking, and people couldn't understand me. And people make fun of me. And all I remember is at some point I was talking to a girl who was worried about me, asked, like, how do you deal with people bullying you? And I started talking about Chrono Trigger. I started talking about video games and how, I can escape video games and this, and how Chrono Trigger, I don't remember what I was saying, but I remember something about Chrono Trigger. Next thing I know, the psychiatrist comes to pick me up, to take me in the office, and they're talking to me, and I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. I'm talking to him, and it wasn't until later I realized I thought I was being suicidal, and I was talking about the video game.
Wow.
And I think
wow.
It's something that stuck with me. But
I would think so.
I know it doesn't have to do with Chrono Trigger, but it had to do with gaming. I know that was a game that I had brought up at that time, because it was a game that had helped me kind of deal with that. Because, like, Chrono is a character that gets made fun of in the beginning. When you go to the castle in the past, they're like, oh, look at his funny hair. And I had funny hair. I had issues. And that's one thing I really connected with the game, because you have Frog, and a character who's not worthy enough to be a knight, not strong enough, he's been deformed. And, you have Chrono, who can't talk, who has messed up hair. All these characters have little issues but they find a way to overcome them. And I think that kind of helped spur me along, too, as a kid, without really realizing it.
That was Mike Alberton of the Games My Mom Found podcast telling us a little bit about why Chrono Trigger means so much to him, why it affects him as a person. And you'll be hearing more from Mike later on in the show. But let's go chat with Ryan from RGB High Score on Twitch as he shares his recollections of this Squaresoft classic. Of all of them, right? You get your Chrono Trigger, you have your Final Fantasies, Illusion of Gaia, Secret of Mana, Breath of Fire. What's the one that connects to you the most now?
Chrono Trigger. Absolutely.
Gotcha. Why is that?
So I think one of the things that's interesting is that Chrono Trigger utilizes the time travel mechanic fairly well. And just the idea of recognizing just the decisions that you make as a person have an impact, across the annals of time. It really resonates with me. Some of the stories as well, when you talk about Glenn's story and how he has, there's certain things, like as an adult, you do things that you regret and you reflect back on them and you have the opportunities for redemption and those kinds of things. So all the different stories that kind of go along with it, as well as Robo having to make some tough decisions as to what crowd to stick with. All those things, it's like you're constantly rooting for them to do the right things, knowing that tough choices come to you. And it's always kind of stuck with me. And I, like I said, I was an adult, so I didn't get a chance to play it as a kid. I don't know if that would have connected as well as a child, but as an adult, it absolutely has.
And that's interesting how games connect with us different based on our ages, obviously.
Right.
And that's the way it ought to be, right? We grow, we change, we evolve, and that's a good thing. And art will always affect us in a different way based on our experiences and our life stages. So it's very cool that you got a chance to experience that game as an adult with a slightly more mature.
Right.
I look at myself, I'm like slightly more mature. I don't know how much greatly it, but that's interesting that you had that experience. If you thought Ryan was a fan and think Mike Albertin is a super fan, prepare to meet the mega fan, the ultra fan. If you run in the same circles as a lot of my guests do in this kind of retro gaming community that we kind of all are a part of, you know exactly who I'm talking about. Next up on the show is Moses Norton, also known as the Well-Read Mage on Twitter, the founder of thepixels.com, the-pixels.com, and the man loves himself some Chrono Trigger. The man's got some strong opinions on Chrono Trigger, and he's got a lot of words for it as well. His love for the game is well documented both on Twitter and on articles and on other shows, and he shares some of his insights and thoughts and opinions about this world-class title. Let's join the conversation. So now, Mr. Red.
Yes.
It is time to talk about the one.
The one. Neo.
Yes. Neo from the Matrix. Which one do you think he would like best? No. It's Chrono Trigger.
Chrono Trigger. Oh.
Yes.
I already swooned. That's good.
I know. Why is Chrono Trigger one of the best RPGs ever made in 2,000 words or less? Go right ahead.
Oh, only 2,000 words or less?
That's all you got? Man, listen, I give you 2,000.
Yeah. So
I can,
I spent 17,000 on Chrono Trigger. So
you spent three episodes of Mage Cast.
I spent 3 episodes of Mage. This is not even my only guest invite to talk about Chrono Trigger this month. People freaking know that I love Chrono Trigger. I guess I don't shut up about it. But so you asked, what makes Chrono Trigger the GOAT, right? That's your question?
Yeah, it was actually half a joke question. I was
because I'll answer it. I
know you will. Well, so let's kind of narrow it down. Let's actually apply the same question from Final Fantasy VI to Chrono Trigger.
Okay.
If you had to suck the essence out of one aspect of Chrono Trigger and make it just a little less than the near perfection it is, what would you do? What would you rob of Chrono Trigger?
So, and I like the way that you phrase that. I'm going to kind of stage my answer here.
That's fine.
To me, so we use a 10-point grading scale at the Pixels. I almost said the Well-Read Mage. Now it's known as the Pixels.
Right.
So to me, if the highest possible score that you can give a game is perfect. Otherwise, you're going to have 11 out of 10, right? Because if you can make an improvement on it, then you've made an improvement on it, but you already gave it the highest score. So anyway, perfection to me in the terms of what we're talking about means nothing can be meaningfully added or removed without doing damage. So not just well, that'd be cool if Sephiroth had a cameo in Chrono Trigger. That doesn't add anything to Chrono Trigger. That is not meaningful. Somebody might really like Sephiroth and it's meaningful to them, but that's not what I mean by like substantial, like something with substance, right? So I gave Chrono Trigger a perfect score. It is one of, I think, 4 games in 5 years that I've given a perfect score to. Because I do think that nothing can be meaningfully added or removed without doing damage. And I'll give you a specific example. Glenn Frog speaks with this archaic, sort of a hodgepodgey language in the original Super Nintendo game. I've never played it, but it's my understanding that they took that out in the DS game. So the question, is that a meaningful subtraction? Does it affect that character and his arc? Or is it something that's essentially just flavor? I tend to lean toward the latter. Okay, so if we're talking about meaningful additions, I would say add connections to Chrono Cross, but that was done in the DS version already. So earlier what I was talking about too, with improvements within limitations, one of the great joys that I get to have with what I do right now is to talk with people who play old games for the first time. Because there's so many people that'll just be like, well, it's just nostalgia. You don't actually like those games. It's just nostalgia. It's just your childhood memories, sepia toning it up with your rose-colored glasses. But when you get somebody who, say, wasn't even born in the 90s yet, playing those games, or when you get somebody who was playing plenty of games for years and years and years and just had never played this one game and get that fresh take on it, that's really fascinating to me. So in the past year, it's been my pleasure to see so many people play Chrono Trigger for the very first time. And I think that's amazing. And so I always ask them questions. What did you think about this? What did you think about that? One of the folks I was talking to was our own Slipstream. Well, I almost said Slipstream Mage. I almost slipstreamed up. Jay Tordo, who's one of our writers at the Pixels. His take walking away was that he wished that you could choose the positioning of your characters once a battle started. So you know that in Chrono Trigger, it's famous for once you hit an enemy on the field, the battle takes place on the field itself. There's no transition screen, and you don't go to a battle screen. You fight right on the field screen. Certainly revolutionary for its time, awesome for its time. Oh, yeah. Not the first to do it, I doubt, but a special earmark of Chrono Trigger for sure. So he suggested, wouldn't it have been great if you could position your characters prior, you touch an enemy, it gives you a minute to position your characters, and then you can start the battle. In order to then take advantage of certain abilities, techs that make use of space. So like Cyclone that spins around, X-Strike that, those sorts of things. I posited one, I don't know that they had the space for that. I don't know that wouldn't slow what is essentially a basic JRPG with ATB systems, so a slightly action RPG. I don't know if that would slow down a slight action RPG into really the antithesis, a tactical RPG.
Right, yeah, that's basically tactics, yeah.
Right, because now you're starting to think in terms of, for every battle I have to stop. So we had an excellent conversation on that. And I think it's an interesting idea, and I'd never thought of it before, so I was really fascinated to talk about it. But that's what I mean when people play this for the first time. They have first-time thoughts. I mean, I never thought of it. I played this game a billion times. So you get to have these really fascinating things. But as far as me, I can't think of anything that would preserve the authenticity of Chrono Trigger, adding or taking away from. That doesn't mean that nothing exists, that, but I can't think of one. So
it's hard. Yeah. It's this is not designed to be an easy one, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't have a good one either.
No, you
I
asked the
shouldn't-
question too.
I know I shouldn't ask questions of which I don't have good answers for, right? I should.
Yeah, I mean, potentially, and there are questions potentially there's no answer to, but so I could say like, well, it'd be cool if they'd add a bestiary. It'd be cool if they added more side quests. The side quests in Chrono Trigger that exist are already very meaningful because they either tie up loose ends or they close character arcs.
Right.
So just adding more side quests to sort of pad the game and give it more length doesn't exactly seem all that meaningful.
No, not at all. Especially like you said, because they do it so well. And again, that's a modern game thing.
Right.
Let's throw some quests in there just to kind of fluff this out a bit more.
Right. If a guy's like, go in the forest and get me 10 mushrooms, come back, I'll give you 100 gold. It doesn't add anything. It just adds an extra 30 minutes of my time.
The only thing I could think of as I'm talking about things I would, if I had to suck the life force out of one thing to like, that's actually nothing. I've always never been the biggest fan of Lavos's final form.
Yeah.
When he's dressed up like an astronaut with his two radishes
Right.
at his side.
Yeah, he looks like a man, right? Yeah.
I never loved that.
Mm-hmm.
I always found it looked really goofy.
It is weird.
So if I had to pick something,
it would be that.
maybe. But you are realizing this is like the tiniest thing you could.
Right, because we're still not
end
talking
guy-
about something like meaningful, right?
No, this is not
No,
meaningful.
no. Yeah.
It's not ruining any. It's not ruining the game. It's not ruining any climactic moment.
Right.
I just don't like the fact that inside Lavos there's a spaceman with two
Right,
eyes.
yeah.
I just don't love
It's
that.
weird. It is definitely weird. And I mean, I could go on about like a theory as to why he's a humanoid in there, or it
Okay.
is a humanoid in there. I don't really want to because I'm not that into fan theories. But
Yeah.
I mean, you could have gotten him in there, and it ends up just being like a guy that turned into like a spaceship or a boat or a castle, like other JRPGs, or it's a dragon or something.
Yeah.
But I don't. Yeah, I mean, I think we agree. It doesn't really matter what it is.
No, and again, it's a silly little dig that I would say. It's funny you said it because I'm thinking that's a Stephen King thing to do. Like my man Stephen King would so do that, right? That's
Yeah, he's a cosmic horror. I mean, it's what
Yeah.
Lavos is. He has no
Yeah.
motivation, no origins, just consume, and you don't know where it came from. Yeah,
into that.
Yeah.
It's very good. I always forget what a supergroup of developers and genius minds that are behind that game. It's like Cream, like the Traveling Wilburys. Like that's a supergroup.
right. Yeah, it really is. And so it's my understanding that this was originally planned to be a Final Fantasy game at one point. The idea of doing a time travel game. And it has that baked into its DNA. I mean, this is Sakaguchi. I remember that old Mega 64. Do you ever watch Mega 64 YouTube comedians?
No.
They did a whole thing where they met Sakaguchi at like an E3 or something like that, and they made him put on like a gangster outfit with like the gold chain that had the S on it, and doing like a rap video, and he's like Sakaguchi. Anyway, he had to be there. But yeah, so many legends, so many talents went into this game, and obviously there's many talented people that work together. There's a lot of big names on this project, and they called them the Dream Team for a reason, because you just don't get this all the time.
Next up, we talk about what I think is the heart and soul of Chrono Trigger: characters. Without these characters, this would be a very straightforward action RPG, but the characters that live in this game are phenomenal, and everyone has their favorite. Daryl, also known as Mr. Thou on Twitter, shares some of his favorites in one of our earlier conversations. If you had to pick a favorite character in Chrono Trigger, who would it be? Luca. Now, do you mean mechanically or just from a story perspective?
Story. I
Story?
didn't really use her much in my party, actually, but as a character, I really liked her. Got a bit of an attraction for the smart ones, I guess.
Yeah, that's cool. Smart and capable and plucky, kind of adventurous, willing to try anything in the name of science and just adventure. Yeah, she's pretty awesome.
Nerdy girls are cool.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing wrong with that. Absolutely. What about mechanically though? Who is like your go-to character in combat?
Isla. Or Ayla.
People are big Isla fans. I maybe I never played her properly. I was never the biggest. I always liked magic, and since she didn't have magic capabilities, I just never. I don't know why. What about Isla really did it for you as far as again gameplay goes?
Well, she's a beast. Like, there's not really much more to say about that. But I loved the Falcon Strike dual tech with Chrono.
That is good.
That one just kind of clears the screen just instantly.
That does kind of wreck pretty well. I don't know. Maybe I just never played it properly. I'm a Robo guy. I think Robo's my favorite story character.
Robo, yeah. I like using him after Chrono was gone.
Yes.
Chrono, Luca, and Magus would be my trio because Omega Flare is just... I love Omega Flare.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, it is pretty overpowering. Yeah, I can't remember. I got to play it again to see... Because I always played with all of them. I always enjoyed just kind of like mixing and matching. And what's great about Chrono Trigger 2 is that there really is no wrong way to do it. I mean, there's the optimal way, obviously. There's there's the way that's the best way, but you can do it any way you like, and you will get a good result. Maybe make your life harder if you do it, with a certain group of characters, but you can definitely do it without too much friction, which is a really really cool piece of that Chrono Trigger puzzle.
Yeah,
it's hard to screw yourself in Chrono Trigger.
And I only just learned that recently. Actually, I've played through it couple dozen times over the years, and up until I was in my 20s, I guess, I was always going Chrono, Marl, and Frog. That was always my go-to trio, and I only just recently started using other characters, and then finding out that they have different dialogue at different parts of the game, so it was almost like experiencing the game all over again, knowing that, hey, these characters say different things at different times.
After the break, Moses and I talk a bit more about some of his favorite characters from Chrono Trigger, and then I tell some personal stories from when I experienced this game as a young kid. All coming up after these words. Whenever I'm putting together this show, especially late at night, once the kids are in bed and everything's kind of quiet so I can yell into this microphone, I like going on Twitch. I like watching streamers, have them in the background, interact a little bit while I'm waiting for things to render and download and all that. And one of my favorite streamers I've discovered over the last 6 months or so is Red Ox PDX. Red Ox as in auxiliary input, PDX. She's a mom streamer, really family friendly, very funny, very witty. She plays a lot of great retro games. Right now she's playing through Secret of Mana, which of course is great fodder for a stream. And she's an exceptionally talented piano player. So half her stream is traditional playing games, and the other half is taking requests for video game music played on the piano. She's incredibly talented, and it's a really fun listen. And as I was just about to get off Twitch, she got rated with 400 people, which is super exciting. She deserves it. She's amazing. Red Ox PDX on Twitch. We've kind of also talked about the characters overarching, right? About how many great side stories there are. Every single arc is interesting. Which of the nice trim, was it 7 characters or not?
Let me see. So you have Frog, Ayla, Luca, Robo. I always say Marley. I do not say Marl because I don't want to harl. Chrono Chrono and Magus. So 7. You're right. Yeah.
7. Okay. So of those 7 characters, trim cast.
It is a trim cast.
Beautiful. Love it. Everyone gets so much time.
Yes.
Which story of which character connects with you on a personal level?
So it's difficult. The big 3 for me are Frog, Robo, and Magus. Robo doesn't get as much screen time as Frog or Magus. You kind of get to return to some of his origins and the idea of, like Robo to me kind of represents like, I will forsake all for the sake of the good. And he has to turn his back on, I mean, he has to become a martyr essentially to his own kind. Frog's story is, you know, you don't want to talk about like tragic scenes. So I remember I was playing Chrono Trigger with then at that time my girlfriend, now my wife, and my kid brother. He was pretty young. And we were playing through Chrono Trigger and I'm reading the dialogue. And we get to the scene that's a flashback that shows Magus and his cronies killing Cyrus and then cursing Glenn to become Frog. And he's struck with magic. He falls off the cliff. It fades to black, fades back in, and he's lying in a pool as a humanoid frog now. And the hero's medal, I think it was, floats down the waterfall and down the stream and touches him. And it's the passing on of a mantle, right? Because his mentor is dead now. And I remember that, like, we were chatting, we were just having fun, reading the game and stuff like that. And at that moment, it went completely silent. Like, you could hear a pin drop, and it was kind of like the air got sucked out of the room. And that sounds overly dramatic to say about a game from, you know, the mid 90s, but really, I mean, like, it impacted just the three of us that were sitting there in that room. And I think that, like Final Fantasy VI, there's very heavy moments interspersed with very silly moments as well.
Yeah, no, that scene is striking. That's just striking.
Striking is a great definition for that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the best I can say it. For me, it was I'm a Team Robo guy.
Yeah,
I love Robo.
He's great.
I mean, the one everyone remembers, of course, is the side quest where he has to plow the field and take care of the tree for 400 years or however long it happens to be.
600 to 1,000. Yeah, so 400. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember when I played it, and again, I forget how old I was when I was playing Chrono Trigger for the first time. It was when it was upon release. And I remember playing it and doing that side quest and being struck by the enormity of time.
Yeah.
In a way I had never been struck by that before.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
I thought, for in a second for them to just warp to, the year 1000 AD from 600 was for them a second. For him, it was 400 years. And he comments on it. And when you find him again, he's rusted. He's like
left in a cathedral, right?
He's left in that cathedral, just sitting there, and it struck me like the passage of time. Like it really felt, wow, time is like a measurable thing.
Yeah,
because when you're young, you don't think about time. It's an ocean. There's no end to it. It's just you have an ocean of time. Mm-hmm. But man, that experience really struck me.
The weight. Yeah. I love that you said that. So somebody. This was a while back, so I know I'm not going to quote it very well, but I enjoy having conversations with so many people. And every once in a while you meet somebody that says something that you completely disagree with. And in this case, somebody told me that there's no difference between characters. All characters are qualitatively equal, essentially, is what they were saying. And there's no such thing as, say, like a good or well-written character. And there's no such thing as a bad character. And I asked, do you think that cardboard cutout characters are good, and he said, well, then you're asking the wrong question. Everything's good. And I was like, oh my. But I think that characters that have a weight to them, that feel like their experiences matter and they impact you, that they resonate with you, I think that's a hint at what a well-written character is. I don't know that we can quantify that, quantify what a well-written character is. There's no one book on writing that has the secret of how to write great characters. So there's a wealth of possibilities and variables, but I think that we can see the earmarks of a good character. And to have a character like that whose story impacts you, haunts you even, doesn't leave you and lingers, that's important.
It's interesting. again, when you talk about characters, and that's kind of what, not to get too far off the path, but
Sure.
that's what this show is about, because we are all well-written characters in ourselves as people, as human beings. Every human being has an interesting story somewhere. There just is. Because you can't walk through this life without some sort of scar, without some sort of joy, without some sort of change, without some sort of growth. You can't. It's impossible. And that's what this show is about. This show is about telling some of those stories of people who were able to grow and change and arc and be affected through a medium of games, just like you would a movie or a piece of music or anything else. That's the crux of this experience, of this show, what's supposed to do. So when you say that there's no such, it's hard to define what a real written character is. You're right, because it's when you write a character, and that's what's amazing about Chrono Trigger and their characters, is that you have to almost sketch them out like you would in a novel. I can't imagine these characters not having a whiteboard, just sketching out like where they came from, who they are, what they experienced, all the stuff you'll never see on the screen. I can't, because that's, you're a writer, and you know how, character diagramming, you know more about your characters than will ever be on a page.
Yeah.
It's just, you do, because they're your characters.
Right.
And that's how you grow a well-written character, is you just sit there. And I used to, when I was doing writing, like fiction writing, I would take my characters on dates. And they would just go on dates, and I would just learn how they react as they go on these dates. And they would never be on a page. It was just, all right, you're going on a date night. Where are you going? You're going to the fair. Oh, wow, I didn't realize you were afraid of heights. Huh, I learned something about you. So the fact that they were able to do that with Chrono Trigger on a 16-bit console is extraordinary.
Right.
And the fact that we're talking about these characters impacting us and having that impact is just a testament to good writing.
Yeah.
And good, and such attention to detail.
Right. No, definitely. And, like storytelling. So you were talking about human beings having stories and being stories. I think that storytelling is one of the most fundamental things in the human experience. It is universal. Our kind has been telling stories since whenever in the past, and will continue to tell stories. We do it naturally in our conversations. We charge people for the stories that we create. It is just, it's part and parcel to what we are, evidently. When you talk about like what is a good character, and you hear a lot, like if you're reading on like how to write well and that sort of thing, or you get advice from people will say that your characters should want something, and that seems like obvious, right? Like when you hear it, it's like, right, because everybody wants something. That's also fundamental, is desire. And then one that I really like is your characters will surprise you if they're well written. So like you were talking about, like, oh, I didn't know you were afraid of heights. For a character to surprise not just the creator but the audience is, I think, when you get
gold.
Yes. That's when you get beyond the cliche, beyond the I borrowed this idea from somebody else, beyond the stereotype, beyond the cardboard cutout, which is a frustration that I have with a lot of stories. That you start to get toward the heart of characters. So, like I said, Frog, love it. Robo, love it. For me, I think Magus is, I don't want to say the best character in Chrono Trigger, but the character that I think is a great example of the kinds of characters that Chrono Trigger has on offer. Because Magus starts off as, what I assumed at the time was going to be the big boss, the big bad, just like sort of the whole Kefka and Emperor thing. And come to find out, he has this pretty complex backstory and fairly complex motivations and desires and the things that he wants. And then making him an optional character is just like an added element of coolness. So it's like I can have a literal like boss fight character in my party.
Yeah.
You kind of feel bad for Frog, but it's okay. It's okay. So
they get over it. They get over it. It's fine.
And then, to be able to see, like, so speaking again to characters being central to the main story, like Magus is super central to the main story.
Oh,
Like
huge.
there's parts where like his machinations and trying to like outmaneuver the player, trying to outmaneuver history is really fascinating. And you get the sense that he is someone who cannot overcome the tragedy of his past. He has sold his soul to attempt to right history's wrongs and cannot do it. Is trapped within that. And even in the additional DS material, what eventually happens to him is he doesn't get to overcome, and so he remains this character that's perpetually within darkness. And to be able to see him as a child, and then to be able to see him as an adult, it is really great. So I think that's a fantastic character in Chrono Trigger.
Next up, Ryan and Mike show some love for Frog, and I give Moses a next to impossible task. At least for him. Let's listen in. Who was your character? Your character in Chrono Trigger?
Like the one that stuck with me.
The one that you just have the most fondness for.
It's Glenn. Just the
So
fact.
You're a frog.
Yeah. Oh, I'm totally a frog. And his music is fantastic too, so that doesn't hurt, right?
The whole soundtrack of Chrono Trigger is is a marvel. It's so good.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So Glenn, of course, because of his story and kind of his arc.
Right. I don't want to like spoil too much of it for somebody who hasn't.
Yeah. Spoiler alert for Chrono Trigger. It's a game that's been out for well over 20 years.
Fair.
That's fine. That's okay. But I mean, I think most people listening to this will have at least some exposure to Chrono Trigger. So, which character in Chrono Trigger did you identify most with?
Probably Frog.
Okay. Yeah. Would you also say he was your favorite?
For most of that time, yeah. Frog, Chrono, and Magus were always the characters that I always liked the most when I was a kid.
Cool. What about Frog connected with you?
The fact that he was a character that was kind of deformed in a sense, or a character that also had he's very down on himself when you first see him, and he feels unworthy, he feels unappreciated, and as the game progresses, he finds strength within himself to face his fears.
Yeah. No, you basically nailed it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you nailed it.
Played the game enough.
What's that say again?
I played the game enough over the years.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely for sure. Frog is a fan favorite. I'm coming to realize as I go through this, like everybody has that story of Frog, and his side story or his backstory is even more touching.
Wait, everything with Cyrus is so good.
Yeah, Cyrus and Glenn and all that stuff. Because Frog is Glenn, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Making sure I've got that. It's been a few years since I've played through Chrono Trigger. I think I'm due for a replay. This show takes all of my free time now.
I know how that goes.
I don't play anything. So at least you have to play something for your show. I don't. I play nothing.
Every week.
Here's the setup. The scenario of this for you. So you're on an elevator. Now, however high this elevator is, it's fine. You're on an elevator and you meet somebody, and all of a sudden you get a chatting with them, and you realize they play games, and you say, "So hey, have you ever played Chrono Trigger?" And they say, "Yeah, no, I've heard of it, but I don't know. I never really had an interest." What is your elevator pitch to that person on why they should play Chrono Trigger?
Now that is a question. So I have been asked that question. Not in an elevator, but I've been asked it online and I've been asked it in person. Because I talk about the game, people are like, "Well, what's so great about this game?" It's not in the Final Fantasy series per se, I'll say.
Mm-hmm.
So why should it have this attention? To me, the most important, unique thing about Chrono Trigger is that it's a collaborative passion project. A lot of games are collaborative passion projects, but not a lot of games are collaborative passion projects between Hironobu Sakaguchi, the father of Final Fantasy, Yuji Horii, the father of Dragon Quest, and Akira Toriyama, the father of Dragon Ball. Additionally, you have a ton of really talented Square employees that worked on this game. You have Yasunori Mitsuda and Nobuo Uematsu working on this game together. It is profound just what kind of game legends can produce together rather than separately. So what you get in Chrono Trigger is, I think, this wonderful, unique. I mean, I can't think of any game that has, to my knowledge, it doesn't exist, any game that has this exact pool of talents. If you know of one, then email me, please, because
yeah, really, I have no idea. No, there isn't.
Yeah, and to that, I mean, if you think about, if you read on the story of how that came to be, how they came to collaborate, it's almost like they're like, yeah, I'd like to do something, sure. And then they got into it and they're like, oh yeah, this is awesome. And we have this part with a dragon tank, and then we could have it goes to the future, it's all destroyed, man. That's how I picture this whole thing. When you talk about a passion project, Mitsuda infamously put himself in the hospital working on this soundtrack so hard. He developed ulcers. He slept in his office. He worked until he fell asleep. I mean, this is a game that these extremely talented foundational developers of video gaming poured their energies and their enthusiasm into. And I think what you're left with is a game that's not pessimistic, is a game that is extremely enthusiastic just to be. And that really comes across. So the dream team to me is the real reason to absolutely play Chrono Trigger. If we're talking about RPGs at all, you have got to know what Final Fantasy is. You've got to know what Dragon Quest is. I haven't played a ton of Dragon Quest, but I've known about Dragon Quest my entire life. There's people who have never played a Final Fantasy. They know what Final Fantasy is. I mean, its reputation precedes it. So to say that the two fathers of just those things work together on this one game is immense. And then you add all the other things. Akira Toriyama, of course, Dragon Ball Z, and on, doing the sort of the world design, the art design, the characters for this game that I think translate real well into the sprites also. And he was also responsible for your humanoid astronaut Lavos too. So maybe someday if you ever meet him, you could ask him, why'd you do an astronaut Lavos?
That was perfect.
Yeah. I mean, maybe he has a good reason. I don't know. Or maybe he was just like, actually, I'm really terrified of astronauts. So there's a couple other things. That's the big one, right? So if somebody gets past that, let's say, why are we even talking about 90s RPGs if they don't know what Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest are? But
I'm assuming that there's a base knowledge. Right. Yeah, you can assume a base knowledge.
But if they don't, I would still say this. I would say it's a highly balanced game with a very concise core cast that does not waste a ton of your time. It's notable for how balanced it is. You don't have to do a ton of grinding like a lot of old JRPGs to get through it. It puts agency into the player's hands. So you, at many points, get to make decisions on how to proceed with the game. Especially late game, you have a plethora of options available to you. Its side content develops the characters rather than sort of detract from them or just waste your time. It's on the Super Nintendo. It's beautiful. The soundtrack is fantastic. It's visually appealing. There's many, many, many reasons to absolutely play Chrono Trigger. Well, obviously I can't list them all. So
no, that's fine. The elevators, the elevator's stuck. Everyone's complaining, sitting there 5 floors below. Come on, where is this thing? No, awesome, man. No, that's encapsulates a lot. It really does. As for me, I've played through Chrono Trigger numerous times. I've gotten all the endings. But it's been a while since I've revisited it. And before this show, I spent about 4 hours with it. I got past 2300 AD. So I spent some time with it just to kind of refresh myself on the experience and what playing that game is really like. And I thought back to when I first played it as a kid, and two moments stick out for me. The first one is the first time you see Lavos. Now, I lived through the Final Fantasy VI World of Ruin. Right? I lived through that cosmic shift from World of Bounds to World of Ruin. But for some reason, stumbling across that screen in 2300 AD and watching the beginning of the end of the world was horrifying. Because it felt so real. It was a sunny, pretty day with a little dome home next to it, and all of a sudden, the ground erupts and fire rains from the skies. And I was stunned. And not only that, later on, of course, you get to see what Lavos actually looks like, and he looks impenetrable. He looks, or she, or it, we'll say it looks just impenetrable, impossible to defend against. It's just chilling. It's a cosmic horror, like Moses said, rising from the ground with nothing but destruction in its mind. It was a formative moment in what I thought kind of fear could be. And the second moment is cliche. I'm not going to be too cool for the room. This is just truth coming out. The campfire scene. Probably one of the most iconic 16-bit scenes in history. Easy in history. Occurs right after the moment where Robo has spent 400 years rebuilding a forest. For you, it's a quick snap. You show up in 1000 AD, boom, it's done. For him, it's been 400 years. And it's the evening after that, and you and your team are sitting in the shade of his hard work, just thinking about what this game is about. Thinking about time, thinking back to the actions they have done and how it affects what's going on now. And it's this really beautiful, cohesive moment of friendship and of just taking a minute to breathe and take stock in what's going on. They're discussing Lavos and they're discussing what they have to do next. And when I see that scene now, it really tells me what this show is all about, what A Gamer Looks at 40 is aiming to do. If this show had like a lookbook or a mood board of images and just inspirational ideas to kind of put together the vibe of what this is all about, the campfire scene would be front and center. As a matter of fact, when I first mocked up a cover image for this show in Microsoft Paint, because that's about as good of an image editor as I can do, when I first mocked it up, my first image that I wanted to be like a cover for the show or, again, an idea, it was just the campfire. From the campfire scene with the words, "A gamer looks at 40" around it. Because that's what I kind of hope this show is. The audio equivalent of sitting around a digital campfire, swapping stories, and looking back. Which brings me back to the question I asked at the beginning of the show. Why does this work? And I really think, past the characters and the story and the music and everything that created this wonderful experience, I think it all comes back to the central promise, the essential desire to go back, fix what we've broken, and come home again. Thank you again for listening to A Gamer Looks at 40. If you enjoyed this program, there's 15 other episodes. You should listen to every single one. They're all about the same length. It shouldn't take you that long to catch up. And if you want to be super supportive, come on, who doesn't want to be super supportive? Write a review on Apple Podcasts, leave a rating, or write a review on your podcatcher of choice if it gives you that opportunity. And follow me on Twitter at A Gamer Looks at 40. And until next time, don't be afraid of those campfires.